When examining the news, I had to ask myself, why do we, as a Western society, feel more for individuals suffering in an issue than a mass of people dealing with a crisis, even if that problem is worse? Furthermore, why do we allow media and news sources to exploit this to their advantage? To analyse this, we must understand that there are 4 components to Engelhardt and Jantz's conceptual framework: distance, scale, actuality, and relievability. All of these are the models in which audiences are separated from certain issues because they are removed from events that are far out of their reach. These parties are generally Western audiences. Scale is represented as audiences perceiving the issue separately when it is mass-related or an individual. If the need is perceived as greater, overall willingness to donate tends to be higher. This portrays how scale differentiates the perception held by Western audiences and the identified victim effect, which leads people to respond more significantly to identified victims than to anonymous masses or small groups. Scale is a concept that demonstrates how the media enforces these subconscious decisions held by audiences and utilize them to their advantage. Researching, I discovered a news piece titled "Yemen on Brink of World's Worst Famine in 100 Years if War Continues." This was surprising to discover as it had not been emphasised in the Australian media yet. It is appalling to learn that this issue has not been reported on as much as other news stories purely due to this psychic numbing that Engelhardt and Jantz discuss, that audiences cannot comprehend the total effects of these crises and thus do not respond or take interest in them. The article also throws out figures to the reader, such as 12 to 13 million civilians at risk of starvation, or 100,000 people killed and millions displaced, thus adding to the low comprehensiveness of this type of issue by Western audiences. As a Western society, we have not seen or experienced this type of extreme loss or starvation, and therefore we are genuinely unable to understand these enormous numbers of people and the conditions they are being forced to survive in. The photos supporting the text are confronting enough of starving children, homeless families, and deserted spaces that enforce the figures, but are still distant enough from audiences to not be actively understood. But why is it that audiences are more willing and able to respond and assist in issues or crises that are focused on a single individual? And also, why are news sources allowed to over-report on these issues as they know that it is how they will get more readers and ratings? Take the case of missing child Maddie McCann, the 3-year-old who was claimed to be abducted in Portugal over 11 years ago. This case study also is based overseas, but has hit all media sources worldwide, being one of the most well-known abduction cases of our time in the world. Engelhardt and Jantz argue the identified victim effect, discussed previously, which ensures audiences are able to relate and empathise with an individual more so than a group of people. Audiences are able to comprehend the crisis of a missing child and also empathise with the parents, as it is an issue no parent wishes upon themselves or any other guardian. News articles are still being published about this case years on and are still getting significant traction. They are complemented with baby photos of Maddie to ensure each reader will never forget her face, the same photos being used again and again. The news articles related to this case are all targeted at Western audiences, as it is known the response rate would be huge. Both case studies of the Yemen famine and the Maddie McCann abduction are awful and should be worldwide news. However, due to media sources exploiting human emotions, one is better known than the other. Engelhardt and Jantz state that the reasoning behind this is the inability to be emotionally moved by groups and also trying to defend themselves emotionally. As I believe, if we were able to comprehend the extent these mass crises are reaching, we would be a lot more responsive to these issues and possibly more willing to help. A case of a missing child 11 years ago is still being reported on, whereas the starvation of 13 million and deaths of 100,000 that are occurring today is barely seeing any Western news site. Media sources should report on worldwide crises more if they are mass-related issues and not deny them the empathy and understanding of audiences due to their own exploitation of human emotions. It is unethical for media sources to determine which stories deserve their reporting purely on their possibility of boosting their ratings. However, this is one standpoint. It could also be argued that if news sources were to report on every single event that occurred in the world, audiences would simply tune out and not respond or interact with any news story, as there is just too much to comprehend. Therefore, some may believe that media sources are ensuring that individuals are caring about a percentage of the issues and thus increase the chance of response from audiences.